chosenmasters.com. Affordable, amazing automated mastering.
What actually is music theory? What is music theory? It's a question that students of music have been asking for centuries, and it's not an easy one to answer. Music theory can be difficult to understand, especially if you're just starting out on your music journey. But once you know what it is and why it's important, as well as its more advanced concepts, why is it important to learn music theory? You can't create music without learning music theory. You can have a good ear, a steady hand, and years of practice, but in order to communicate your musical ideas with other musicians, you must know how to read and write musical notation. But what does it all mean? And why should you care about it? Here's a brief overview of what music theory is, why every musician needs to learn it. Music theory makes up an integral part of every musician's education. If you're serious about making music, it's something that needs to be understood on some level. Chord progressions. When you're making music with chord progressions, it's important to know a little bit about music theory. A chord progression is essentially a series of chords that fits together well. There are some standards when it comes to chord progressions, but overall, there's no right or wrong way of structuring one. The way you want your song to sound is more important than following any set rules. Creating a melody from chords. While there's no rule that says you have to start at step 1, creating chords, and go from there, it can be a useful exercise for many musicians to break their music down into smaller parts before putting it all together. A great way to do that is by building your melody off of chord progressions, which is why it's good for musicians of any skill level, or even non-musicians, to understand what melodies are and how they work. This principle involves taking a chord progression in whatever key we're working in, analyzing each note within each chord individually and then basing our melody off of those notes. That way we'll ensure we're creating solid harmony with each song's chorus or verses. Melody. A melody is a series of notes played one after another. Melodies are often separated into two categories, ascending and descending. Ascending melodies typically move from lower to higher pitches, while descending melodies move from higher to lower pitches. While these terms may sound more like directions on a map than music theory, they're important terms to understand if you want to learn how to compose your own melodies. Notation. Musicians use a wide variety of notations to write down their music. Since there are many different types of instruments and ways to play them, it helps to have symbols that represent every nuance of sound. There are also symbols for things that aren't sounds, such as dynamics, or changes in volume. If you're a budding musician, it's worth learning about how music notation works. It will help you read sheet music and expand your understanding of music as a whole. Time signature. In music, a time signature indicates how many beats are in each measure and which note value gets one beat. It's a relatively simple concept that boils down to two numbers, one on top of another. M number tells you what kind of note gets one beat, quarter notes, eighth notes or 16th notes. The most common time signatures in Western music are 2/4, 3/4 and 4/4. But there are plenty more out there if you know where to look. Key signature. There are 24 different key signatures in Western music, but some have only one sharp or flat, making them easier to learn. The key of C has no sharps or flats and is a good place to start. Look for other keys with easy to spot differences from C and memorize those first. Key signatures typically appear near, or directly under, the treble clef sign. Be sure to look on both sides of that clef. There are major scales, Ionian mode, written above it and minor scales, Aeolian mode, below it. Major scales go high low high, minor goes low high low, and has three notes that sound like they're not part of a scale. What do you do if you see an F in front of a G? That's called a raised fourth, meaning there is another note that can be added before moving on to the next octave, also known as going up an octave. Major and minor. Try finding all 12 possible triads within each major and minor scale. You will then know how to play every single chord within each key signature without having to shift around at all. Start by finding every triad within your own instrument's key signature, the home bass, using its diatonic chords.